The first time I realized my wife might be living a whole other life was when my bank app thanked me for a transfer I did not make. It was not a huge amount, just small enough to pass as a mistake, just big enough to feel intentional. And the note on it said for the future, like my money had started writing plans behind my back. I stared at the screen in our dim kitchen light, and I remember thinking, either I am losing my mind, or someone in this marriage is practicing for a solo act. When Lauren walked in, she smiled at me the way people smile at security cameras, warm enough to look innocent, empty enough to mean nothing. I did not confront her yet, because I do not swing at shadows. I turn on the lights first, and the truth always leaves paperwork. It always does. We were the kind of couple everyone called solid, which is a polite way of saying predictable. Her name is Lauren. She is organized like it is a religion. She labels everything: spice jars, storage bins, even the dog treats. She once labeled a drawer miscellaneous, like chaos needed an address. I work in logistics, which means my job is noticing what does not belong where it is. So when something feels off at home, I do not ignore it. I start counting. I start mapping. I start noticing patterns. And for a day, I tried to tell myself the transfer was nothing. A recurring subscription, a bank glitch. Maybe I tapped something by accident. Even though I know my own hands, and they were not the hands that moved that money. The next morning, I checked the statement in my car before work. The kind of place you do things you do not want your life to see. And there it was again. Another transfer to a savings account I did not recognize. Not at my bank, not a joint account. A different institution, and the label made my stomach drop. LL Reserve. Lauren's initials, and reserve like a parachute packed in secret. My brain tried to be polite about it. It offered excuses. Maybe she opened a savings account for us. Maybe she planned a surprise. Maybe she finally listened when I talked about building a cushion. But my gut went quiet, like a room that knows the next line is going to hurt. That evening, I cooked dinner. Lemon chicken, roasted potatoes, her favorite. Because if you want the truth, you do not start with accusations. You start with normal. You keep the air calm. You give the other person room to walk themselves into a corner. She came home later than usual, heels in her hand, hair pinned up like she had been in a hurry, and she kissed my cheek with the same camera smile. I said, "Long day." She said, "So busy." Then she said something that sounded rehearsed. "My phone died at work. Sorry if you called." I had not called her once, not once. And my brain noted that too. Like a pin on a map, over dinner I asked casually, "Hey, did you open a new savings account?" She did not choke. She did not pause. She laughed fast, too fast. "No, why would I do that? We have our accounts, remember?" And she reached for her water like the question bored her. But her eyes did a tiny flick away. The same way she does when she is trying to remember what she already told me. I said I got a weird bank notification. Probably nothing. And she nodded too hard. Like agreement was a performance. Banks are always messing up. Call them tomorrow. Then she asked me about my day. Too many questions. Like she was trying to flood the room with noise so no one could hear the truth dripping. The next day I called my bank with my office door closed, and the representative confirmed the transfers were authorized from my login, from my phone. At times I was either asleep or in meetings, and my phone never left my pocket in meetings. Not because I am disciplined, but because I am paranoid about exactly this kind of thing. The bank could not reverse them without an investigation, and the receiving account was at a different institution, meaning I would need to contact that bank, the representative asked. "Do you recognize the recipient?" And I said no, while a colder voice in my head whispered, "You do recognize it. You just do not want to." That night I checked everything. Wi-Fi logs, device access, password manager, and I found my bank password had been updated months ago, with no memory of me doing it, which is the kind of detail that either means you are forgetful or you are being handled. I went to the drawer where we keep important documents, the one she labeled in her perfect handwriting, and I noticed the tax folder was thicker than last year, which made no sense. Inside it, there was an envelope with a bank logo I did not recognize, folded and tucked behind a brochure for mortgage rates, like someone hid a needle in hay and trusted the hay to protect them. My hands stayed steady, which surprised me. I opened the envelope, and there it was. A welcome letter for an account in Lauren's name, our address on it, and an email listed that was not the one I knew. It was close. Almost the same. Like a copy that hoped no one would look closely. I sat at our dining table listening to the refrigerator hum, and I felt something inside me shift from confusion to clarity, because now it was not a feeling. It was a fact. Lauren had built a separate financial life inside our marriage, and she had done it carefully, quietly, the way people pack for a trip they do not plan to take with you. I slid the letter back into the envelope and put it exactly where I found it, because I was not done turning on the lights. I was just getting started, and the part that made my stomach twist was not even the money yet. It was the question I could not stop hearing. If she prepared a reserve, who exactly was she reserving it for? The next morning, I did not rage. I did not slam doors. I did not even sigh dramatically into my coffee like a man in a commercial. I did what I always do when the numbers stop making sense. I built a timeline. I opened my laptop at work and pulled 12 months of statements. Every paycheck, every bill, every grocery run, every transfer. And once I started looking, the pattern showed itself like a hidden watermark. Small transfers at first, then slightly bigger. Always on days I was distracted, days I traveled, days I worked late. Days a normal husband would not notice his own financial pulse being gently lowered. The total was not a little. It was not an accident. It was a year of quiet extraction, like someone siphoning gas while you sleep and smiling at you in the morning. I kept my face neutral through meetings, nodded at jokes, answered emails, and in my head I kept hearing that label, LL Reserve. It sounded like a bunker. It sounded like she was planning a future where I did not exist. That evening, I acted normal, which is harder than it sounds, because normal requires you to swallow words that taste like metal. Lauren came home and asked if we needed anything from the store, like we were still a team, like she had not been quietly drafting me out of her life. I said, "No, we are good." And I watched her put her keys in the bowl by the door, the same bowl she bought because it looked farmhouse chic, which is code for expensive ceramic you cannot drop. She moved around the house with confidence, like she belonged in it, like she had not been stealing from it. She talked about a coworker who annoyed her. She talked about a new Pilates class. She talked about a restaurant she wanted to try. She talked about the future with me in it. And the whole time I kept seeing the envelope behind the mortgage brochure, a little paper mouth holding secrets. After dinner, she went to shower, and I did something I had never done in our entire marriage. I checked her car. Not because I wanted to be that guy, but because I already was that guy. I just had not admitted it yet. Her car smelled like her usual vanilla air freshener, but there was another scent under it. A sharp cologne. The kind that tries too hard. I opened the center console and found receipts. Not many, she was careful, but one of them was from a gas station across town. Not near her office, not near our home, not near anything we ever go to. And the time was late, later than her so busy excuse. I snapped a photo of it. Then I found a parking slip tucked into the side pocket from a garage downtown, a weekday evening, and the spot number was written on it. Like a little breadcrumb, I did not even feel shocked anymore. I felt focused, like my emotions had stepped aside and handed the wheel to my brain. The next day I took a half day off work, and I did not tell her. I drove downtown and parked across from the garage on the slip. I felt ridiculous, like I should be wearing a fedora and calling myself Detective Hurt Feelings. But I also felt calm, because calm people make fewer mistakes. I walked into the garage and looked around like I belonged, and there it was. Her car, tucked in the same row, same general area, like she had turned routine into a hiding place. I stayed in my car across the street where I could see the exit, and I waited. I am good at waiting. Logistics teaches you patience. Nothing moves until it moves. and then it moves fast. After 40 minutes, her car rolled out, and she was not alone. A man sat in the passenger seat. He leaned back like he had paid for comfort, and even from that distance I could see the ease, the familiarity, like he had been there before. She laughed at something he said and touched his arm. Not a big touch, a casual touch. The kind of touch people do when they do not think anyone is watching. My chest tightened. Then my mind sharpened, because now I had the answer to the question. She was reserving it for him. I did not follow them like a movie. I did not chase, I did not honk. I did not do anything dramatic. I took a photo of the car at the light when it paused. I caught the license plate of his car when they pulled into a lot. And then I drove away. Because the point was not to watch them eat or smile. The point was to build a case that could not be waved away with tears. I went home and put the photos into a folder on my computer labeled Inventory. Because sarcasm is sometimes the only way to keep your dignity intact. Then I called an attorney, a family law attorney with a plain website and a long list of reviews that basically said, "She does not play." I booked a consultation for the next morning, and I slept on the edge of the bed like a stranger renting space in my own life. When Lauren came home that night, she was cheerful, too cheerful, and she brought me a little bag from a bakery, a peace offering, a distraction, a bribe, and she said, "I thought you might like these," and I said thanks. And I ate one in front of her, because I wanted her to see that I could take something sweet from her and not melt. Later, she sat on the couch scrolling her phone, and every few minutes she angled it away from me like the screen had something private to protect. I watched her thumb move fast, then stop, then move again, like she was in a conversation that required precision, and I asked, "Who are you texting?" And she smiled without looking up and said, "My sister," which would have landed better if she actually talked to her sister more than once every lunar cycle. I nodded and turned on the TV, and inside my head I said, "Okay, so we are doing lies on easy mode now." The next morning at the attorney's office, I laid everything out, the transfers, the envelope, the photos, the receipts, and the attorney leaned back and said, "First, do not confront her yet. Second, do not empty accounts or hide assets. Third, keep collecting documentation." And then she said the words that finally made the air feel breathable. "What your wife did may qualify as dissipation of marital assets and potentially fraud. Depending on how she accessed your accounts, courts do not like spouses who play secret banker. She told me to open a new account in my name only for my paychecks going forward, not to punish, but to stop the bleeding, and she told me to change passwords on everything, email, banking, phone carrier, even streaming services, because people who hide money will absolutely weaponize a Netflix login." I laughed once, short and dry, and she did not laugh back. She just nodded like she had seen this movie too many times. That afternoon, I changed every password and enabled two-factor authentication, and within an hour my phone buzzed with a notification. Someone tried to log in and failed, then another, and the attempts came in bursts like panicked knocking on a locked door. I did not get angry, I felt validated. Because you do not pound on a door unless you expected it to be open. When Lauren came home, she acted normal for about 5 minutes. Then she said, "Hey, did you change something on the Wi-Fi? My phone is acting weird." And I looked at her and said, "No, why?" And she blinked fast and said nothing, just glitchy. And I said, "Huh, that is strange." And she forced a laugh, and in that moment I realized she had been inside my digital life like it was her closet. And now she was standing outside of it with nothing but a fake smile and a story that was running out of oxygen. And I knew the next twist was coming, because people like Lauren do not quietly accept closed doors. They look for windows. 2 days after I locked down my accounts, Lauren started acting like a person auditioning for the role of perfect wife. She made breakfast. She cleaned the kitchen twice. She suggested a weekend trip. She even laughed at one of my jokes that was not funny, which told me she was nervous because she only laughs at my bad jokes when she wants something, and what she wanted was access. I could feel it, like a hand hovering over a keypad, waiting for me to type in the code. That night she curled up next to me on the couch and said, We should combine everything again. It is simpler. It is more married. She said it like Married was a brand with a loyalty program. I kept my voice calm and said, "We are fine." She said, "You have been distant." And I almost said, "You have been expensive." But I swallowed it, because sarcasm is fun, but evidence is better. She rested her head on my shoulder and whispered, "Are we okay?" And I stared at the TV and thought, we are so far past okay, that okay is waving at us from another planet. The next morning, my attorney emailed me a checklist: copy bank statements, copy tax returns, print screenshots of suspicious transfers, list household assets, list debts, document your observations, do not hack, do not trespass, do not do anything that makes you look like the villain in your own story. I loved that last part, because I did not want revenge. I wanted justice, the kind with paperwork and quiet consequences. I spent my lunch break at a print shop, feeding pages into a machine like I was printing a new life. The clerk asked if I was starting a business, and I said something like that. And I carried the stack to my car and felt oddly light. Because when you put chaos into folders, it stops feeling like it can swallow you. That afternoon, Lauren texted me, "Hey, my card got declined at the pharmacy. Can you check if the bank is having issues?" And the message was wrapped in casual emojis. Like betrayal could be softened with a smiley face. I wrote back, "No idea, maybe call them." And I watched the typing bubble appear, disappear, appear again. Like she was choosing which version of herself to send. She replied, "Okay, weird," and then nothing. When I got home, she was already there, and she greeted me too brightly. And I could see she had been crying earlier, not fresh tears, dried ones, like she had practiced. She said, "We need to talk about money." And I said, "Do we?" And she flinched like the calm in my voice scared her more than yelling would have. She said, "I feel like you do not trust me." And I almost laughed. Because trust was not a feeling anymore. It was a crime scene. Later that evening, she tried a new strategy. She brought out a folder, my kind of weapon, and she sat at the dining table and said, "I have been thinking about our future, about saving more, about being responsible." And she slid the folder toward me. Inside it was a neat little budget plan, printed, color-coded, labeled, and on the top page she had written, "Shared goals." It was beautiful, and it was completely fake, because people who actually care about shared goals do not build secret reserves. I looked at her and said, "When did you make this?" she said, "Recently." I said, "Why now?" she said. "I just want us to be better." And the words sounded good, but her eyes did not match them. Her eyes kept darting to my phone on the table like she expected it to light up and betray me the way she had been betraying me. I closed the folder and said, "Thanks. I will look at it later." And she nodded, relieved, like she had bought time, and I let her believe that, because time was something I could afford now that the bleeding had stopped. The next twist came from a place I did not expect. My mom, she called me on Saturday morning, voice sweet, too sweet, and said, "Your wife came by yesterday. She brought me flowers. Can you believe it?" And I sat up in bed. Because Lauren only visited my mom when she wanted a photo for social media. I said, "What did she want?" My mom hesitated. And hesitation in my family is basically a confession. She said, "She asked about your accounts. She said you have been stressed. She wanted to help. She asked if you still keep your emergency cash in the safe." The safe. I felt my stomach drop. Because yes, I had a small emergency cash stash, not life-changing, but enough to matter. And only 2 people knew the combination, me and Lauren. I told my mom, "If she comes again, do not tell her anything." And my mom said, "Honey, what is going on?" And I said, "I will explain soon," and I meant it. But not yet. Because I needed to keep control of the narrative. I needed to stay the adult in the room. I drove home with a new kind of urgency, not panic, focus, and the first thing I did was check the safe. It was in the closet behind a stack of old winter coats. And when I opened it, the envelope of cash was thinner. Not empty, but thinner. Like someone took a bite and hoped I would not count the crumbs. I counted, because I always count. and she had taken exactly $500. Not random, not messy, exact. Which meant she was still in planning mode, still building that reserve, still feeding that future. I did not confront her. I did not even mention it. I took a photo of what was left. I wrote down the amount. I noted the date. And then I changed the safe code, because I was done being predictable. That night, Lauren came home with takeout and a smile. And she said, "I thought we could have a cozy night." And she set the bags on the counter like she was setting down innocence. I watched her carefully, because now I was not just looking at betrayal. I was looking at escalation. She chatted about nothing. Then she casually said, "Did you move stuff in the closet?" I could not find my scarf, and I said no. And she frowned, and I watched her brain run through options. Then she said, "Also, do we still have emergency cash, just in case?" And she laughed like it was a cute question. I smiled back and said, "Yeah, we are fine." And she watched my face like she expected me to blink wrong. When I did not, she looked away and took a bite of noodles, chewing like she could swallow her own suspicion. The next day, I got a call from a number I did not know. I answered because curiosity is my weakness. A man's voice said, "Hi, is this Mark?" And my throat tightened because he said my name like he knew me. I said, "Yes. Who is this?" He paused, then said, "I think we should talk. About Lauren." And for a second, my brain flashed through every option. Blackmail. Threat. Prank. Then he said, "I am not trying to cause drama. I just did not know she was married." And the room went quiet around me. I could hear my own breathing, the man continued. "She told me she was separated. She said you were basically roommates, and I do not do that. I do not mess with marriages." And I almost laughed again. Because even the guy she was reserving her future for had standards. I said, "What is your name?" He said, "Evan," and that name hit like a clean slap. Because I had seen it before. Not his face, his name. It was on a calendar invite Lauren once asked me to add to our shared schedule. She said it was for a work meeting. She labeled it E, just E. And I remembered thinking, weirdly secretive for someone who labels spice jars. I said, "Evan, why are you calling me?" And he said, "Because she asked me for money. She said she needed help until the divorce was final. And she said she had savings, but it was tied up." And I went cold, because the reserve was not just a plan. It was a story she was selling. I said, "Did you give her money?" He said no. And then he said, "But she showed me screenshots of transfers. She said you were controlling." And I realized the micro-twist was bigger than I thought. She was building a villain version of me to justify what she was doing. And that meant she would not stop. She would rewrite history if she had to. And I knew in that moment, calm was still my weapon. But speed was now part of it too. Because if she was already telling lies about me, she was already preparing for court in her own way. And I needed to be prepared in mine. I told Evan, "If you are willing, I need you to save everything. Texts, screenshots, dates." And he said, "Okay." And then he said something that made my hands tighten around the phone. She told me she has a fund. She called it her reserve. And I stared at the wall and thought, of course she did. Of course she gave it a name like it was a cute little pet. And when we hung up, I did not feel broken. I felt clear, because now I had a witness. And witnesses turn private pain into public truth. And public truth is exactly what courts understand. On Monday, I met my attorney again. I brought the photos, the safe count, and the call log from Evan. She nodded like she had been waiting for this chapter. She said we file today, not later, because the first person to file often controls the timeline. That afternoon, Lauren texted, "Can we talk tonight? Heart emoji?" And I almost respected the audacity. I did not reply. I just forwarded the message to my evidence folder. Then the real twist hit. My payroll email pinged. Someone tried to change my direct deposit again, using a form with my name and a signature that looked like mine. If you squinted, I did not squint. I called HR, locked it down, And I realized Lauren was not just leaving. She was trying to take the runway with her. That night I came home to Lauren sitting at the table with 2 wine glasses like we were about to toast to betrayal. She said, "Please sit." Voice soft, eyes sharp. I sat. I said, "Talk." She slid a paper toward me, a draft separation agreement she clearly downloaded and edited. And she said, "We can keep this private, no lawyers, no court, just fair." I laughed once and said fair is a funny word from someone who emptied my safe and tried to reroute my paycheck. Her face froze. Then she snapped back into calm. She said, "You are imagining things." I said, "No, I am documenting them." And for the first time, her smile broke, like a mask cracking at the edge. 2 days later, she was served at work, and she called me furious, not sad, furious, because consequences feel rude to people who prefer secrets. She said, "How could you do this to me?" I said, "You did it to you." She said, "I deserve a fresh start." I said, "Then earn it without stealing mine." That evening, my attorney filed for temporary financial orders, and the court froze unusual transfers. Lauren tried to play victim in texts. I stayed boring and factual. Then Evan sent me screenshots, her messages asking him to send money to her reserve account, the same account name, LL Reserve. My attorney smiled for the first time and said, "Judges love receipts, and you brought a whole store." At the hearing, she cried and said she was scared of me. While sitting 3 chairs away like fear needed personal space, the judge asked for evidence. My attorney handed over statements, safe notes, HR logs, and Evan's screenshots. Lauren's story collapsed in slow motion. The judge said marital funds are not a private exit plan and ordered her to return everything, plus fees. Outside the courthouse, she hissed that I ruined her future. I said, "No, I canceled your subscription to my life." I walked to my car feeling quiet and clean, because the best revenge is not drama. It is a court stamp and my name back on my own money.